probably there trying to make this happen. So Joel came to one of our very first meetings of CCCKC. Joel took over as president for a while. Joel serves on our audio team here. Joel's a DEF CON goon on the worst team ever because you missed the entire con and you sit in the lost and found room the entire time. So Joel has put in countless hours with very little fanfare. So tonight, when he's going to give us an excellent talk on some open source security tools, let's give Joel a fantastic round of applause for everything that he does.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I'm going to talk about the Open Source Security Information Manager. This is it started as an open source project, and then a for-profit company kind of grew out of it. But the original open source tool is still out there, and you can get it. And it's currently maintained, but I have a love-hate relationship with it. So we'll go over some of the details here, and then I'll go over and do kind of a demonstration, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So, my name's Joel Kirshner. I'm a little bit of everything geek, security engineer by day, and then help out various nonprofits and all that stuff at night. So, and my interest in this is that I always want to, well, I work in a school district, and so we're always cash strapped, and so I'm always looking for that next thing that will help us be more secure, but at the same time not break the budget. And what OSSIM is, it's free as in beer, and it's a means of collecting all the information that your network generates just on its own. So you have net flow, you have intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention, all that kind of stuff. Each and every one of those devices kind of comes up with a little report on its own, but it's usually not very useful by itself. The new ones are pretty good, but it's trying to pull that all together in one place and try to make sense of it all, and that's the point of a security information manager. Now, there are many things that it does. So potentially you got asset tracking, log management, that kind of stuff. SIEM is not really log management because of all the filtration that has to go through. It's not really a place where you need to go back in time and kind of figure out what went on. You need a different solution to pull that one off. But SIEM is very good for situational awareness. And really the intended audience for all this is not necessarily your Fortune 500 companies, because they can afford to throw serious resources at this type of solution. This is for the small guys. If you want to set up your home lab, if you want to set up a small company or something like that, say a small company has to be PCI compliant and they need some type of awareness tool to kind of help them with that, and this would be a solution for that. Now, one of the things that we're doing here is we're trying to collect different types of information from different sources. And so in this case, intrusion detection. And so essentially what intrusion detection is that it's something that listens to your network and then is looking for signatures of things that could be bad stuff. Normally it gives you a whole bunch of logs and you have to kind of be trained to read them. So the source address, the destination address, the ports and all that kind of stuff. And then what does that little signature actually mean? And so what OSSIM does is that it has its own built-in security sensor tools, and it's pulling that information into this user interface. And so one of the things here, this is a screen grab from their event interface. And so searching for stuff here, it's pretty much you put in a piece of text and it goes through and it just kind of does a plain text search through all the stuff that you get. But you can also search for IP addresses, attackers. The value of this is that it wraps in all kinds of extra information in with this. So your IDS may hit something, but it doesn't make any sense. However, there's a threat feed that's built into OSSIM. It's called the Open Threat Exchange. So it'll mix in that information with that signature. So you'll see, okay, you get a signature. Well, I don't really care about Java 1.8. But then the IP address that that host was talking to is in Russia. Wow, okay, that's a little bit more interesting. And then on top of that, you have something coming in from OTX saying, hey, this is a really bad host. It's been doing bad stuff to a lot of different people. You need to watch out for that. And so all of this is mixed into this interface. And then say, for instance, you want to dig down deeper. Well, what is this traffic? It takes packet captures for you. And you just, once you click on the event, you go down to the packet capture. And you can either see it right into the, right in the user interface, or you can download it and pull it into Wireshark. And so that's a neat feature. And so here's a little bit more about what the packet capture looks like. So at this point, I've talked about individual alarms, individual pieces of information that come in and show up as an event. But that doesn't really tell you a story. A story has a beginning, a start, and an end. What the alarm setup is all about is that it's looking for that beginning, that middle, and that end of a potential event. It's looking for a suspicious file download, because the IDS will tell you, hey, this person's just downloaded, a binary off of a website that I don't know about. That by itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. But then in combination with 15 minutes later, it starts beaconing out to the internet to known malware websites. Okay, that's a problem. And then you start seeing scan traffic coming from that host. So that's what the alarms are all about. You're looking for a specific story. And then it's looking for those components, and it says, you know what? I found all these components for this host. I'll throw up an alarm that says, hey, this is an infected host. This is what happened. So that's kind of what the essence of the SIEM does, is that it's taking all these different pieces of information from different sources and then trying to figure out a situation just by looking at all that in context. I think in certain circles it's called the kill chain. Certain events happen in a certain sequence in order to infect a host. So that's kind of what this is looking for. So most of us have managers. If not, we are managers. And I don't like this type of reporting. The top 10 lists aren't particularly effective. They are effective if you're trying to wow people. So I can show you over the past, say, 24 hours or past month, what nations have been attacking us. That's always a fun one. Top 10 list of most common exploits. It doesn't get into the nitty-gritty that security engineers are interested in, is that you're not looking for the most common of stuff, you're looking for the rare stuff, the little blips on your radar. And not always really effective, these top 10 lists, but it's very effective when you're trying to communicate to management and trying to communicate to your stakeholders, hey, this is what's kind of going on, and here's kind of something out of the data that we've been collecting. So the things that I'm not really particularly happy about is that OSSIM isn't really Windows friendly. The plugin support is meh. So what it does do right out of the box is probably what it does best, which is it listens to open source security sensors and then pulls in that information and it tells you the story. Trying to pull in third-party sensors, it starts getting more difficult. Then there's the things that will burn you, the frustrations. When I think 5 years ago, maybe more, we got their professional product and plugged it in, started routing all of our syslog to it, and it died badly. Had to reinstall it, it died. I think we went through about 3 or 4 reinstalls and eventually got up the database and all the settings where it stopped dying. But that was my hate relationship with it, and that just over the years it's burned me over and over again. And one of the some of the things you might run into is some of the plugins are out of date, and so you need to work kind of in the background to get those up to date and then kind of fix it. Which, it's open source, so you can do that. driver support for server class hardware is a little bit limited. So it's kind of a frustration where you install it on a big honking server that you're hoping that won't become overloaded, and then it doesn't support the NIC, and so you have to go hunting around for a third-party kernel module. Documentation is, well, at one point it was really crappy. They've gotten better. And some of the asset control scans and that kind of stuff, it'd be nice to be able to schedule those, but no. It just fires everything all off at once, and I got in trouble over that. So scanning a Class A network all at once, not a good thing. And by default, it doesn't really have log management. I mentioned earlier, SIEM is not really log management. Log management is you're trying to create a faithful recreation of what happened based off of the log events that you've collected from the past. So I have all my servers sending logs to a central point, and then if something bad happens, I need to be able to use that information to recreate a retelling of what went on during that time period. A SIEM just takes bits and pieces out of those logs to give you situational awareness, so you may be missing information that you need out of that. And so you might want to add an additional product in addition to OSSIM to accomplish that. But then you come to acceptance.
I get it.
So you move past the broken dreams, all the things that you'd hoped it would do but doesn't, and come to terms with what it does do. And it does a lot of stuff, and it does it pretty well. Then you just kind of plan ahead for your hardware. What really helps is that if you virtualize it. So every once in a while you get a bad update, and so this kind of keeps this problem at bay, because virtual machines, you can just snapshot it, and then if it goes bad, you just go back to the snapshot and you're done. And schedule some regular reboots, because this is held together by zip ties and duct tape. And one of the problems is that some of those aspects, some of those sensors have memory leaks, and for a long time I had to sit there and baby those servers through and have them reboot every 24 hours and that kind of stuff just to get them through the day. I just pulled out one of my sensors out of our other data center today that had been on faithfully, just ran out of memory and useless. So in any case, it's something to watch for, is that because you're trying to cram so much into one install of Linux, and nowadays we have something called containers, which prevents a lot of these problems. And so there's some solutions out there that I'm looking into. Hopefully I'll make a talk for that use containers, and so those should be an interesting topic to go over. And my follow-up on this is that most log event managers need a heavy forwarder, like syslog. And so think of this as part of your complete breakfast. So what this does is that it goes through, you throw all your logs at it, and then it picks out the bits and pieces and then turns that into a situational awareness. So you throw something like Splunk Heavy Forwarder into it, and then all of a sudden you get all your logs faithfully recreated in Splunk. Meanwhile, you're still getting your situational awareness out of this. And the beauty of this is that because it's open source, there's no limitations on it. So if you scale out your machine enough, then you can easily handle a corporate level load on this. It takes a little bit of effort to get it set up that way, and does certainly need some baby. But the beauty of this is that you don't have to sit there and worry about, oh, we're going to go over our allotment of daily storage. For instance, Splunk has that, where you buy your license at 50 gigs per day, and then you got to sit there and sweat it every day to make sure that, hey, I don't want to go over my license or it'll lock me out or something like that. So that's the nice part about this, is that if you take the effort, take the time, you can easily scale this up and have a good solution. And Suricata, is everybody familiar with Suricata and Snort, their intrusion detection systems? Yes?
Snort, yes, Suricata, no.
Okay, so Snort is an intrusion detection system, so is Suricata. Both of them are open source projects. I think Suricata was started with a federal grant of some sort. And both of them are specialized in different things. And I think they've been kind of vying for who's fastest for quite a while. I think at this point they're about as fast as each other. But each of them do slightly different things. Snort is really good. They've enabled some application level functionality into it. So you can look at not only signatures and traffic, but you can also dig into individual application level protocols and figure out what's going on there. And then Suricata has really implemented a whole lot of protocol level stuff. So you can potentially pull in and do NetFlow from it. You can do DNS, you can do HTTP, and just pull out all that information from that traffic easily and turn that into actionable information. So for instance, if you're trying to research DNS traffic on your network, trying to see if you have some command and control nodes going on or some weird DNS stuff, Suricata is really good at that, and that it can just dissect your DNS traffic and then give you a log of that. But the nice thing about this is that OSSIM is integrated in with Suricata, so you're pulling in NetFlow information, you're pulling in packet captures, file signatures and that kind of stuff, and then it integrates it into its user interface, which is something that not a lot of open source SIEMs will do. They'll just show you one type of sensor input and not necessarily mix in other information into it. And I think my closing note on that is scale changes everything. So if you're a small shop, you can easily set up a single machine with OSSIM and have a good solution. But as your needs increase, everything changes because you can't just scale up a single server. You can only scale up a single server so high. At a certain point, you need to scale outward and sideward, using clustering, for instance, using NoSQL databases and that kind of stuff in order to deal with the deluge of information that a corporate environment generates. So when you're planning for your corporation, even though you may be small, you may want to look out in the future saying, hey, even though this is free, I don't know if this is going to scale as big as we're going to get, so perhaps we should build that into our plan. And then on that note, I'm going to do a little bit of a walkthrough in the interface here, and then we'll have some Q&A. So just a second. Okay, the demo gods are not with me. All right, I'm going to skip on to the question and answers. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
I noticed you mentioned like Splunk with the heavy forwarders, and this is an open source solution. I didn't know if it had integrations or ties into Elk, like Logstash and Kibana and stuff.
OSSIM by itself, I don't believe, has direct tie-ins to Elk, but you can easily make it part of your Elk solution. So because it's a Linux distribution, you can get right at the rsyslog settings, and then you can potentially set that up to either write directly to Elasticsearch, or you can set up a log capturing tool. I believe NXLog is an open source project for log capturing, and you can set it up so that it'll look at multiple different files, and then it'll send that on to your Logstash setup. As far as a heavy forwarder, you just install the Splunk heavy forwarder right on top of it, and then tell it to look at the log directories. And so I think it's like var log Alienvault devices, and then it has every device that it gets, it creates a subfolder, and so you just have your heavy forwarder work out of that. In addition to that, you can have it monitor the log files that OSSIM generates, and then there's an application for that inside of Splunk, and so you can actually look at a lot of situational awareness information inside of Splunk as well. Any other questions?
What kind of hardware do you need? Like, can you run on a Pi or something?
This is x86 only. So you can do 64-bit or 32, but unfortunately it doesn't support any other platforms. The other part of this is that what amount of hardware? At least, I'd say you can get away with 2 cores and at least 4 gigs of RAM. But I think if you're going to put it into a production environment, I think you should probably look at least 4 cores or maybe 8. And then 8 gigs at the minimum, preferably 16 or 32. Any other questions? Once, twice. So thank you very much for coming tonight.
Actually, one question: is it enough of a pain in the butt that you would not want to run it on your home network?
It works. So you can, if you virtualize it, So if you virtualize it, it's very easy to set up on your home network. I think we've done a few talks about how crazy the virtual networking is inside of VMware. And so I think if you just have your network hooked in there or any VMs, and it's sitting there monitoring on that virtual switch, then it'll pick up that traffic. And that's what I'm doing at home right now. You can also potentially, through VMware or whatever virtual solution of choice, you can hook in a USB Ethernet adapter and then hook that into a monitoring port on a smart switch. Or if you just have a 10100 network, you can use those LAN tap throwing stars and monitor that way. But you need a couple extra network adapters to pull that off.
That's awesome. Let's give him a hand one more time.